In the 1296, King Edward I of England, known as Longshanks, invaded Scottish territory. According to a chronicler, he conquered the Kingdom of Scotland and passed through its lands from north to south and east to west in just 21 weeks. While Scottish nobles accepted English conquest, the knights and peasants did not. Among the Scottish patriots, there was a hero who inspired the people of Scotland to rise up against the invaders and the nation's enemies. For a long period, the kings of England, a wealthy and militarily strong neighboring country, had aimed to extend their influence over Scotland, which was smaller and less populous. Toward the end of the 13th century, England's power grew significantly under the effective leadership of the intelligent and experienced King Edward I, known as Longshanks. After strengthening his authority within England, Edward intervened in internal struggles within Scotland, which had erupted following the end of the ruling dynasty. In 1292, he placed his puppet John Balliol on the Scottish throne, who swore fealty and vassal allegiance to him. Soon after, however, Balliol, influenced by dissatisfied Scottish nobles, broke his oath and allied himself with the King of France, a long-standing rival of England. In retaliation, Edward invaded Scotland in 1296 with a large army, which included several Scottish aristocrats and their own forces, and managed to conquer the entire kingdom within a few months. A key event in this conquest was the Battle of Dunbar on the 27th of April 1296, in which Edward's commander, John de Warenne, Earl of Surrey, decisively defeated the main Scottish forces. On the 2nd of July, Balliol capitulated and just a week later abdicated the throne, eventually being taken to England. All Scottish feudal lords paid homage to the English king. Scotland's main symbol of royal power, the Stone of Destiny, upon which Scottish monarchs had traditionally been crowned, was removed to England, along with other precious artifacts and archives. Essentially, the independent Kingdom of Scotland thereafter ceased to exist. Even though Scotland's senior nobility accepted English dominance, the lower-ranking nobility, knights, townspeople and peasants were markedly unhappy with the abuses of English officials, heavy taxation and forced conscription into the English army. Thus, unrest erupted in many parts of Scotland almost immediately after Edward's main forces withdrew. A major uprising broke out in the May of 1297 in the region of South Lanarkshire under the leadership of William Wallace. His origins remain uncertain. According to one version, he was a younger son of a minor Scottish knight named Sir Malcolm Wallace, while another theory states that he was the younger son of Alan Wallace, a notable Scottish aristocrat. Regardless of his exact origins, William Wallace was destined to become the main hero of Scotland's First War of Independence. Wallace quickly proved himself to be a courageous leader. He succeeded in taking the county capital of Lanark. Having gained wide popularity among his countrymen, secured the backing of local churches, and having allied forces with nobleman Andrew de Moray, Wallace freed from English control not only Aberdeen and Inverness, but also Arkett and all territories north of the River Tay. The English governor in Scotland, John de Warenne, was forced to lead his entire army against Wallace. The English and Scottish forces confronted each other near Stirling Bridge, across the River Forth. The English possessed a significant advantage in numbers, 1,000 cavalry and 9,000 infantry, opposing approximately 300 or 500 cavalry, according to various historical estimates, and around 6,000 Scottish infantry. The English army was led by the victor of the Battle of Dunbar. Thus, the outcome of the battle appeared predetermined, with the Scots seemingly doomed to defeat. On the morning of the 11th of September 1297, John de Warenne ordered his army to begin the crossing of the River Forth by a single narrow wooden bridge, estimated by chroniclers to have been no wider than about 6 meters. At first glance, this decision appeared reckless, but the substantial numerical superiority, particularly in heavy cavalry, gave the English commander reason to be confident of strategic success. Moreover, the Scots, under the command of William Wallace and his ally Andrew de Moray, has positioned their forces on nearby hills at a considerable distance from the crossing. English archers crossed first, engaging the Scots in a skirmish intended as a warm-up before the main encounter. The exchange of arrows lasted for about half an hour, without significant advantage gained by either side. Under cover provided by the archers, English knights began crossing the bridge, intending to pose an immediate threat and thus secure safe crossing conditions for their infantry. However, the Scots were no less aware than Warenne of the dire consequences if the English knights succeeded in crossing, and therefore moved some infantrymen armed with long spears forward, forming a solid phalanx. The knights who had managed to cross initially engaged the Scottish infantry and were successful for some time. Seeing that events were not unfolding according to plan, Warenne decided to speed up the crossing, ordering additional cavalry troops onto the narrow bridge simultaneously, ultimately leading to disastrous consequences. By about 11 o'clock, Stirling Bridge collapsed under their weight, plunging England's finest knights into the depths of the river. Those who had already crossed, along with their supporting archers, were swiftly defeated by the Scottish infantry. At this critical moment, Moray, having early crossed downstream with 600 lightly armed cavalrymen, attacked from behind the English forces, who were now confused and demoralized by the loss of most of their knights. With an almost intact Scottish army still present across the river in front of them and enemy cavalry pressing from behind, the English broke ranks and fled, pursued relentlessly by Scottish cavalry and small infantry detachments that had crossed successfully. Ultimately, the fleeing English were driven into marshy terrain and decisively scattered. As a result of the battle, the English lost the majority of their heavily armored cavalrymen and approximately 5,000 infantry soldiers. Scottish losses are estimated around 1,000 men. After the victory at Stirling, the uprising across Scotland grew even stronger. Even the previously hesitant Scottish nobility now joined the rebellion. Wallace's prestige rose to unprecedented heights. He was granted the title Guardian of Scotland, effectively becoming a regent and later responsible for running the kingdom in the absence of a legitimate king. Wallace's forces liberated practically all of Scotland and even launched raids into the southern English provinces. King Edward Longshanks had to assemble a large army once again and personally set out to reconquer Scotland. And although in 1298 Wallace's army was ultimately defeated by Edward at the Battle of Falkirk, and Wallace himself eventually captured and executed, the Scottish War of Independence did not end there. It continued for another 3 decades, with the Scottish cause taken up by the noble Robert the Bruce. Bruce led the Scots to several important victories against the English, ultimately restoring Scotland's independence and becoming the new King of Scots. On the spot where William Wallace achieved his victory at Stirling Bridge now stands an imposing memorial known as the Wallace Monument, a lasting symbol of the Scottish people's heroic struggle for independence.